Since the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere have been rising.
When you look at how the world is today, we've been really using up too much of the planet for our daily needs. Obviously, it's unsustainable. It's gotten to that point. And all of this is basically just leading to a planet that won't be inhabitable.
An increase in this greenhouse effect means even higher global temperatures. And higher temperatures have caused the increased rate of melting of ice in the Arctic and in the Antarctic, as well as in Greenland. Now, a rapid loss of mass of these permanent ice caps will lead to rising sea levels all over the world and will lead to more floods near the coastlines. Also, the increase in global temperatures will lead to increased temperature of the ocean surface, which feeds typhoons.
There's no way you can say one particular typhoon is due to climate change, but the frequency and intensity will almost certainly increase.
In Mount Everest, I saw the receding glacier in the baseline, and I can just imagine exactly how it will be about 50 years from now if there will still be a glacier or ice at the base camp.
I dove the Great Barrier Reef and saw the world-famous ribbon reefs. And I compared what I saw to what Jacques Cousteau aired when I was young, and what I saw was basically death.
I think we really have to do something. Time is of the essence, and we have to act now.
Carbon dioxide and methane are the two major anthropogenic greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change. In determining the fluxes of methane and carbon, the lack of data in the Southeast Asian region leads to huge uncertainties in the flux estimates. Therefore, the logical next step is to establish a TCCON station in this region. TCCON, or TCCON, is the Total Carbon Column Observing Network. It is a network dedicated to the precise measurements of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane.
I joined the Energy Development Corporation as a director, and I saw in the Lopez Credo, one of them is stewardship of the environment. Voltaire Velasco, he's our weatherman on the Mount Everest expedition, and he mentioned to me about a blank wall in the monitoring of the carbon stream and this part of the region. So I said that I think you should meet the top executives and officials of the Energy Development Corporation.
Oscar M. Lopez is the chairman emeritus of the Lopez Group of companies, and he recognizes the importance of climate change science and in improving weather forecasting capabilities of the country.
When we heard about the project from Voltaire, we were first quite curious. And then when we realized the global implications that, okay, there was a big gap in information that needed to be filled in the world's knowledge of climate change and how it was affecting the world. So if it led to a greater understanding of the impacts of climate change, then we would definitely love to support it.
And it's, again, one of those wonderful things where you say, let's support it, because your belief is smack in line with the proposal that's there, and we have the resources as a company to help.
Ms. Agnes de Jesus of the Energy Development Corporation organized the site visits. The clear sky probability in Dumaguete is quite low. Leyte was an ideal site for a TCCON station. Unfortunately, Typhoon Yolanda, one of the strongest typhoons ever to hit the Philippines, struck Leyte, causing billions of dollars in damage, wiping out infrastructures, and causing several thousands of deaths. In the future, hopefully, these events are one of the things we could better understand with the establishment of the TCCON station in the Philippines. So, the board members of the Energy Development Corporation suggested to us the possibility of Burgos, Ilocos Norte as a TCCON site. the clear sky probability of Burgos would enable lots of satellite overpasses. For satellite validation purposes, the Burgos site would be the best site among other sites that we've assessed.
So by now, the vessel should be on its way to Manila, and RC Express will be monitoring it. And they'll be updating all transport network on the ETA. All transport network now shall notify and update RC Express and EDC of the arrival of the shipment, and we will be the ones to process and secure the necessary clearances to unload and discharge to the assigned port of disembarkation in the Philippines. And it's looking like it's going to be Manila North.
If we can make the instrument arrive by the 21st of December, they're okay with it. So there's people on site and they will be able to receive it in Burgos.
Once it's arrived at Burgos site, the unloading will commence.
The container will be unloaded by a crane.
But for the 100 kilos pallet, scientific equipment, can be unloaded manually. There's a trolley, a hand pallet.
So this will be handled by the
They
4
are
or 5
technical teams,
persons.
yeah.
And in December 2016, the transport of the whole TCCON equipment, composed of 2 containers, went smoothly and has been unloaded at the Burgos site. The Burgos site is located at the EDC's wind farm project and the solar farm project. Ilocos Norte has been declared a coal-free region and is powered by 100% renewable energy coming from the wind farm of the Energy Development Corporation.
The good thing about that location close to the substation of the wind farm is that the security is adequate. And during the technical assessment done by the TCCON team, they mentioned to me that in terms of line of sight to the satellite, it will satisfy the requirement.
There are also other competing sites as suggested by the Japanese science team. These sites were in Vimay in Thailand and in Kototabang in Indonesia. But satellite measurements would not be as abundant compared to the Burgos site. Therefore, the TCCON steering committee in Toronto chose Burgos as the best candidate site for a TCCON station and would be the first TCCON station in Southeast Asia. Dr. Isamu Morino from the National Institute of Environmental Studies in Japan is the principal investigator for GOSAT-2 validation. When I went to Dr. Morino and put forward the TCCON Philippines support, we decided to work together.
As you know, in order to keep the quality of the TCCON data, scientific quality is also very important. So I think we have better install this in Philippines.
Established in 2004, starting from measurements in Park Falls, USA, Northern New Zealand, and New Orleans in Antarctica, the Total Carbon Column Observing Network, founded by Professor Paul Wenberg at Caltech, is a network dedicated to the precise measurements of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Now there are more than 20 sites all over the globe providing important scientific data for carbon cycle science, as well as validation data for several satellites like Japan's Greenhouse Gas Observing Satellite, NASA's Orbiting Carbon Observatory 2, and previously the European Space Agency's Skiamaki satellite on NVSat. TCCON observes the atmosphere from the ground, looking up into the atmosphere, while the satellites look down and measure from above.
トボトルのカラーを小井さんどう捨てたかもしれない。We have
Six leveling plates.
Yeah.
Do you think it's okay if we weld this?
After set, we have better fix.
We had better weld.
Fix, yeah.
Fix, yeah. These are leveling plates. This should hold the container and keep it
Yeah, in Japan we fix here,
footed. I see.
but it's not so strong.
Yes.
In Japan it's okay, but
In the Philippines, you have 300 kilometer per hour typhoons. We need this fixed.
Yeah.
Omotai. Heavy. Slowly learning Japanese. TCCON measures the whole atmospheric column from the ground up to the top of the atmosphere, which we define to be about 100 kilometers, and then averages along that column. Because of the nature of this measurement, the TCCON total column measurements give information on regional sources and sinks of these greenhouse gases. TCCON is a remote sensing method, which means that the object that you are measuring is inferred remotely. Other methods are called in situ methods, which means that you measure that object or that particle directly by either capturing it and then later measuring it in the lab, or by being exactly at the position of that object or particle that you're measuring and then doing the measurements right there in real time. With TCCON, we are able to complement the in situ sampling network because the in situ sampling network gives very, very precise measurements of greenhouse gases in a localized area. But TCCON measures the total column of the atmosphere, which is from the ground to the top of the atmosphere, and this total column represents a larger region.
The question that we all have to ask ourselves as individuals is, every single day, what did you do today to make the world a better place? Not just for yourself, but for humanity. In terms of extent a person or a company should go to protect the environment, I think everyone should go as far as they can, right? To protect that which we have left. And it's important for individuals to act ahead of organizations because the individual is the greatest social unit of change. But it's also important that organizations wake up and then band together and act because organizations have the resources and the leverage to do things.
We've always believed in doing the right thing. You know, as you pursue business, you don't want a business model that basically destroys the environment around you or destroys the planet.
One of the really nice things about the Burgos experience has been the attitude of the EDC, which after all is a very successful and commercial company, but with a focus on renewable energy, that they have put aside a significant amount of their earnings into environmental causes through supporting things such as this, compared to countries where it's all just about money, and no company would do that unless there was a profit involved. So it's a very refreshing view.
For companies like us, it's very important that we create business models that lead us towards the world we want, which is why we've really focused on building our business around really the low carbon energy models. At this point in time, it's a path that also takes a lot of vision. It also takes a lot of courage, especially when you see companies around you continuing to make money by following business models that are coal-fired based and all that. We're saying, no, we're not going to go that way. We're going to go another path.
Nice one. One down, 20 more to go. This is 5 years of hard work and perseverance and trying to convince people and finally getting it to this place. It was like seeing the summit of a mountain after a long, arduous climb. It was quite gratifying to see the TCCON instrument unveiled and standing at the EDC Burgos Wind Farm project facility. Gregor-san. Willkommen. Ja. Es ist wirklich nett, Sie hier herzlich willkommen zu heißen. Ja, 15, aber wir haben uns hier hingesetzt. Chino-san, good to see you here. Welcome. Irashaimase. Isami-san, my name is Voltaire. It's a pleasure to welcome you here. Chino-san. Two more. Cheers.
Thank you. So now we are complete, yeah? Everybody is here?
I think so. So, Chino-san, Sato-san.
Chino and Sakai, Izumi, and Sato.
Okay.
6.
So we will be 10. This is our third visit to Lawag, heading toward Burgos, Ilocos Norte. This time it's going to be a very busy week because we will be unpacking and installing the instruments with the aim of having everything running and in good order when we leave. Now we have engineers from Japan and an engineer from Germany, Gregor Surovic. I've known Mr. Surovic since 2003 when I was still a student in Bremen. And our main objective this week is to unpack and assemble everything, install the instrument and align it and have it running by the end of the week. So tomorrow I think it will be a very hard day in terms of physical labor because I just found out that the boxes were stapled with 4 or 5 inch nails with no heads, and there's hundreds of them, so we would have to use crowbars in order to open the boxes.
protocol for those who are new here to conduct orientation in the area, as well as safety and security orientation, because EDC is very concerned on the safety and security of the personnel at site.
I have a meeting with the local government officials and the town mayor, and the purpose of this meeting is for me to explain to them the purpose of this project and what we are doing here. Meanwhile, the LiDAR team and the TCCON team will be unpacking and put all the necessary instruments into the container.
Good morning, Your Honors. Thank you for, especially to our Vice Mayor, Mayor Anton Garcia. In behalf of EDC, we would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this project. Now, before we do the presentation, please allow me to introduce Dr. Voltaire Velasco. Dr. Voltaire Velasco is a Filipino scientist who has been assigned to manage and to monitor the implementation of this project.
Vice Mayor
Happy New Year.
Nice to
our scientist, Filipino scientist,
Yeah.
Voltaire.
Happy New Year.
Siya ang in charge dito sa TCCON project.
So, without much ado, let us all welcome Dr. Velasco to do the presentation of this project for us.
TCCON is a consortium of institutes around the world. Grupo namin, Total Carbon Column Observing Network. So meron kaming instrument, spectrometer siya. Ang ginagawa niya, tinitingnan niya yung araw, tapos yung sun's rays, as it passes through the atmosphere, it gets absorbed by molecules. So yung absorption na yun yung mini-measure namin. The Philippines is located in this very special region wherein a lot of the pollution from the troposphere, from the lower ground, are uplifted and elevated into the stratosphere. And this has very significant effects on the global atmosphere. Now, recently, this has been a report from the United Nations University. The Philippines is ranked as second most vulnerable to the risks of climate change. This is very important because climate change is the next biggest threat to mankind, and this is really happening. At the same time, the Philippines is located in a region where we don't know so much about our environment, about our atmosphere. So this is also one of the reasons why we cannot predict the weather that well. So for example, the prediction for this hour from a very reliable weather forecast is supposed to be raining, but now we have really nice sunshine. So the weather forecasts don't really get the actual weather that's going to happen in this region. And one of the reasons is we don't have monitoring stations, so we cannot put that information into the weather models. That's why the global community said that we really need some monitoring station here in this region, and the Philippines is a very good candidate for that. You cannot really say anything about the future of the carbon uptake and the carbon emissions if you cannot really quantify it. So the reason for this high uncertainty is the lack of stations in Southeast Asia. And this has been put forward to the global community. We need a station in Southeast Asia. We need the TCCON station there. Because satellites, they orbit the Earth, they also need ground-based stations to validate their measurements. So the Philippines is the second largest producer of geothermal energy in the world. As I said before, we are second in the most vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. But at the same time, we only emit small amounts of carbon. So at the moment, for example, Karma estimated that we only emit 1/80th of the emissions of the United States. That means 1 year of emissions from power generation by the Philippines, our whole operation in the whole country, all the power plants for a whole year is only equivalent to 4 days of emissions of carbon in the US. And I haven't even included China here or the big countries like India. The other significance of this region is the science. As I've said before, we are in a region wherein we are at the foot of this giant elevator that puts pollutants into the stratosphere. Recently, scientists have determined that an accurate representation of this region, what we call the UTLS, or the upper troposphere, lower stratosphere region, will improve predictability of climate models and weather forecast. But at the moment, we don't have so much information on this region. So that's why the Philippines is very important.
The only way that this symbiosis method, meron tayong bayanihan, at least we are really come up for a reality of this project. Without cohesiveness, wala tayo. No cooperation, nothing will be done on Earth.
Today, you will be working more than 6 feet above the portaban, and body harness is needed. So we can supply you body harness. We need also to have hard hat.
Yes,
we can let you borrow some.
We need also to inform the barangay officials.
Yes.
And we will invite also the Metro, MPBC, engineering, at least malaman din natin at may disseminate natin sa mga tao na wala tayong cause ng any pollution about our windmills.
Will we be given copy of the result?
Oh, sure. Yun po ang mandate ng TCCON, or Total Carbon Column Observing Network. Yung research namin, kailangan yung results open for public.
Several years we sat there with a plan but no instrument. We had to find somebody who could come up with $1 million to build the instrument, and that eventually came from the Japanese partner, NICE, which is the National Institute for Environmental Studies in Japan. They are charged with validating the GOSAT satellite.
GOSAT was launched in January 23rd, 2009. We have data more than 7 years. And still we are working in the validation of the GOSAT product. And after success of GOSAT 1, we started GOSAT 2 project. And the GOSAT 2 will be launched 2 years later, 2018.
And so out of that need to validate GOSAT 2, the new instrument, they came up with a TCCON instrument, built it in Japan. It was a joint effort with us, and then we shipped it to Burgos, and it's worked extremely well.
What we see here is a so-called solar tracker. The solar tracker is a unit which follows the sun all day long, from the sunrise to the sunset. It is able to catch the sunbeam, and it will guide the sunbeam perpendicular down to the spectrometer. The idea of this instrument is before the sunbeam is reaching the solar tracker and the measurement station, it has already passed all the atmosphere. And while the sunbeam is passing, some of the sunbeam will be absorbed by all molecules, by all involved gases, especially CO2. And finally, they create some absorption in the sun spectra. And those absorptions can be recognized like a fingerprint. That means each particular gas has a certain signature in the spectra. And by this spectrum, we recognize all the involved gases the sunbeam passes before it reaches the spectrometer. And the spectrometer downstairs is able to analyze those data, so we can identify the greenhouse gases as well as we can see the change in the absorption depths. That means the concentration.
Sunlight is captured by the solar tracker. It's directed straight down into this entrance tube, and then focused onto the aperture inside the instrument, and then it gets split into two, and then it gets recombined into one beam again before it goes through the second aperture and then into the detectors.
That's the idea of this instrument, to follow the concentration of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to make a certain forecast for the climate change.
This is our LiDAR system. LiDAR, light detection and ranging. This LiDAR system is built for the validation of the GOSAT-2 satellite. So in TCON FTS, we also installed a LiDAR system because aerosol particles, small particles suspended in the atmosphere, like dust particles, sulfate particles, might affect the GOSAT carbon dioxide, methane, column measurement. So we use simultaneously TCON FTS and LiDAR system when the satellite overpasses above the Virgo station. Russian excited the neodymium YAG rod, then raising started, like this. So there's a beam here. This is the expander to narrow the beam divergence, and then like this here, and then upward. Start to measure. Yes, like this. This is signal. From the ground up to the 30 kilometer. So after the measurement, we analyze where aerosol exist, or cloud exist, or stratospheric aerosols exist, and how about the water vapor profile. So this information is very useful or goes up to product validation, and also aerosol is important for pollution and climate change.
Chino-san, so today you have installed the power supply to your LiDAR. The chimney is installed. All the externals are finished.
Power supply. 247 volt.
Okay, we need to take care of that.
A little bit high.
Yes. And then we'll do the grounding.
Yes, do the grounding.
For the TCON FTS, all the external work has been done successfully. The solar tracker is installed on the roof of the container. The solar tracker cover is also working perfectly. The LiDAR team has finished all their work for today. All the external components have been installed and working properly. Basically, it's working perfectly, but we have to check the alignment of the spectrometer and do some more fine adjustments. first priority is to get the internet going into the van. So we have to connect it in router first, and then we have to have internet connection to the outside world. Okay. Uchino-san, when do you want to open the chimney? Today? Now?
No, yeah.
Now, okay.
So we will provide assistance.
And there's one issue we have to fix. If there's time, I'll try to do some alignments. But before we do the alignment, I would like to take advantage of the sun, do some solar measurements, then do the alignment later so we can compare before and after. So
the internet next to
the alignment.
CAM
tracker. So I'll first go with Uchino-san with the chimney first thing, and then while you sort out the cables and install the router, and I'll come down and
CAM tracker issue.
Yeah. Now I can open up the interferometer compartment.
TCCON relies on doing the measurements very carefully and as close to physical perfection as our techniques and our instrumentation allows us to try and get the most accurate answer that we can.
Hori-san, could you see that laser dot over there? There, can you see it?
I see.
Yeah. My goal is to have it centered.
Center.
Yes. So I'm going to turn some screw, one screw. Can you tell me if it's like right direction or wrong direction?
Yeah.
So I'm turning now. 1, 2, 3.
Wrong direction.
Okay. I'm going to turn the other direction now.
Yeah.
Which way is it moving?
This direction.
Are we far from the center?
Far.
Okay, I'm going to touch the third screw. Tell me.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, correct.
More?
More.
More?
More.
More?
More.
More?
Okay.
Okay. Not centered.
Not center.
I need a live feed. I need a live feed.
Whenever the sun is shining, we can make long measurements and we can refine the physics until we get the best possible, most accurate answer that we can. And TCCON now, for things like CO2, carbon dioxide and methane, is the most accurate way to do that by remote sensing.
Nominal resetting is difficult.
Yes. Because there's many axes. The laser can move 3 axes. First prism can move in 3 more axes.
Yeah.
And then another prism. So. Not center anymore.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that. Collimation.
Offset is large, but this output of the radiation is too small. So totally, this adjustment, they would be difficult.
For many of these analyses, the important thing is the small differences over space from one place to the other. If you have 400 parts per million of CO2 here and 410 here, The natural state of things is the 410 will diffuse to the 400 and they'll mix together until there's 405 anywhere. So if we make a measurement here of 400 and here a measurement of 405 and give that to a modeller, he would say, oh, you must have a bigger source of CO2 here. It must be diffusing over here. But that would be wrong if really both were 400, but our measurement was not accurate enough to tell the difference between 400 and 405. So very small differences become interpreted by the analysis as large sources and fluxes of a trace gas or transport of a trace gas from one place to the other. So we're always trying to improve that accuracy so that it doesn't get misinterpreted as a false flux. Now, when a satellite passes over Burgos, for example, it's only there for a few seconds. So they don't have very long to make the measurement, it's a snapshot. What TCCON allows is that every time the satellite flies over a TCCON station, we can compare the two measurements. The TCCON measurement is calibrated as well as we can, and we can relate the satellite measurement to that, and that provides like a correction, if necessary, to the satellite measurements to bring them in line with all the other measurements. And because TCCON has become, for remote sensing, is the most accurate way to do it, we found that both the modelling community and the satellite community all come to TCCON as essentially the gold standard at the moment. It's always a race. The satellites are getting better and better, and we always have to try and make our measurements better and better to keep ahead of them.
So first we need to do an HCl cell measurement, and then we could determine whether the alignment improved or not.
Sometimes this fight can feel very lonely. Sometimes there's a tendency to think that, oh, this is just too big a battle.
This is a very clear case with the current debate over reducing carbon emissions. There's a lot of people who are very comfortable with the status quo and they don't want to change, they don't want to give up their energy. They didn't find it so difficult in the 80s to give up aerosol cans and save the ozone layer, but now it's turning out to be extraordinarily difficult to give up energy and save the climate.
In terms of climate change and in terms of global warming, the two major causes of emissions are fossil fuels and as well as destruction of tropical forests. Of course, fossil fuels contributing much more than 80%, but a lot of forests are still being destroyed. And so we need to address both of these problems, not just fossil fuel emissions, but as well as forest destruction.
Nature for me is essentially the agglomeration or the gathering of everything in our planet that is alive and in particular that sustains life. So everything from flora, fauna, the beautiful coastlines, lakes, rivers, waterfalls, every single thing. Nature for me is something that we should protect and defend for future generations.
Seeing the beauty of nature also meant seeing the destruction of nature. And growing up in this place with industrialization and urbanization happening, that's something that you see every day.
I've seen exactly how the environment can be awesome and devastating. I've been in the middle of a storm in the vastness of the sea, and you're simply a small speck. One big wave, you'll turn over. I've been in the top of the mountain, and I saw that if the mountain will roar and express itself, you're nothing. Man is just a small speck. So these mountains, the environment, the sea are something that we should really respect, because by protecting it, it will nourish life.
So I thought to myself, I have to do something to stop this destruction. And I thought the best way I could do that is through science. First, trying to understand the workings of nature and the planet, and then maybe through science, help in preserving the environment. Growing up close to nature, I've always regarded the experience as something spiritual. Some people go to church, I go to the woods, and I go to the mountains. Nature teaches and nature nurtures. We are dependent on nature and our environment.
My father has always loved nature, he's always loved the environment. He's always brought us to places where we've had the opportunity to enjoy nature. So we grew up loving it, and when that happens, I guess you see also that you want your children and your grandchildren to enjoy the same things. I think that's probably what drives us also to do this.
Even as a little boy, climbing trees to backpacking throughout central India, I mean, it's just always something that I've craved to connect with nature at all times.
I'm an outgrown Boy Scout, and Boy Scout loves nature and the environment. It is that appreciation that had given me the passion to do something, to be a good steward of the environment.
In the 1980s, we discovered the ozone hole. And within a few years, we discovered the cause of the ozone hole. We have to get rid of these chlorofluorocarbons if we're going to stop catastrophically reducing ozone. The world didn't wait until it was proven. We got rid of a lot of those chlorofluorocarbons. Industry produced alternatives that didn't destroy ozone, and now the amount of chlorine in the stratosphere is going down, the ozone's starting to recover. We showed with the ozone hole that firstly man could affect the Earth on a global scale, and he could also fix it. But we're having an extraordinarily more difficult time with climate. The vast majority of climate scientists recognise there is consensus that we have a real issue with the climate, but there's a real problem in getting, at a global scale, people to respond to it and reduce their energy consumption or use renewable energy in order to ameliorate that problem. It's a different world. No one wants to change.
So my studies have led me to different places, the Arctic, the oceans, the mountains, and trying to understand nature and trying to understand the effects of humans on the environment, the effects of pollution, the transport of pollution. So this led me to remote sensing and to working with the TCCON community. With the establishment of a TCCON station in the Philippines, our understanding of the man-made effects in this region will be a lot clearer. And the improved measurements of greenhouse gases in this region will hopefully lead to policies that will control these emissions, because these greenhouse gas emissions are, after all, the main cause of global warming.
Mark you where infinity is on the telescope rack. And then you can put it in, have a look at the image of the entrance aperture and go forward and back and work out if it's actually focused or not.
You want to go down to the coast there and then focus it on the mountains?
Yeah, we can do that.
I think it's important for many of us that are in this fight to always know that there are people around that also care the same way. There are many of us also that want to do the same thing and the right thing, and we all just have to be able to know how to work together, collaborate, and bring the fight to where it needs to go.
not just one individual or one village or one city or even one country. What is at stake is the whole planet. We've got a group of nations to address the challenge of climate change.
I've seen with my own eyes glaciers in the Alps receding and probably not coming back to their previous state in a very, very long time.
As we sailed the whole of Southeast Asia, we saw how erratic the weather was.
We're seeing also a lot of the destruction that's happening from climate change brought about by storms that are so powerful already. We've never seen these kinds of storms before.
17 of the 18 hottest years on record have happened since the year 2000.
Droughts, wildfires, flooding, all over the world.
It's a big pressing problem. It is the pressing problem of our time.
These are all consequences of a warming globe and could lead to irreversible damage on our planet, which is what we're trying to understand and hopefully prevent for the future generations.
You all right?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Thanks to one of my mom's gadgets, I was able to place the flashlight perfectly in front of the first aperture, illuminating the aperture wheel. It was very convenient. My mom would have not expected that I would use this for that purpose. But the moment of truth, yeah?
Wait 15 minutes.
15 minutes?
Yeah.
Dave and I tried to improve the alignment of the instrument. So we looked at the laser fringes, centered in the aperture, and at the moment we are just evacuating the instrument, readying it for cell measurements, which we will take, and the cell measurements will give us an indication of how aligned it is. Our record to beat is 97.9% at 1 millimeter aperture. And the deciding factor today is the modulation efficiency at 1.0 millimeter. Let's see if it's better than 97.9%. One dBd, but yeah, which is then
still
cut.
It's ASCII. It's not as accurate. You're better off using the original file. There's no point whatsoever using DPTs.
Yes.
Almost 1.
1.000 and 1.001.
For 0.5 millimeter
For
aperture.
0.5.
Okay.
0.996, 0.997. Okay. The result of that alignment we did was 99.95%. The next plan is we'll just keep this setting and start with the solar measurements for TCCON.
Let us all welcome Mr. Federico R. Lopez, Chairman and CEO of First Philippine Holdings Corporation, for his opening remarks. Let us all give him a warm round of applause.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome all of you to this gathering of esteemed members of the Philippine scientific community.
TCCON is already operational. It is the sense of satisfaction that just like finally you reach the summit.
It was quite a few years in the making and driven largely by Voltaire Velasco, who really made the initial connections with the EDC, the Energy Development Corporation, and set up the essential collaboration several years ago, that there was a will to build this station, and the role of the EGC has been terrific because they have given us so much and been so very supportive.
All the data is put together and you now have a global picture, particularly from this TCCON station in the Philippines, gathering information in the Far East, in Southeast Asia, filling a gap. I think the science is going to be harder to refute. So it's going to be a huge source of support. It's going to have an impact.
I'd like to acknowledge the fruitful partnership that EDC and the Oscar M. Lopez Center has forged with the National Institute for Environmental Studies, Japan's Center for Global Environmental Research, and the University of Wollongong in Australia. We also acknowledge the valuable technical support from the US NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Meteorological Institute of Japan. And my heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Voltaire Velasco and the TCCON scientists for their dedication and enthusiasm that resulted in the successful installation and smooth operation of the 24th carbon station in the Philippines. Thank you very much and a pleasant day to all.
These stations have contributed so much to carbon cycle science, leading to more than 100 scientific publications since the establishment of TCCON. New satellites also rely on TCCON as their validation network, and more satellites in the future will rely on TCCON as their validation network. A lot of people have extended their help and have given more than what is expected from them. Personally, I'm very grateful to them. It is thanks to people like them that the efforts to save the planet continues for the future generation.